Welcome back to On the Ball, the podcast series from the Vanderbilt Sports and Society Initiative. I'm Andrew Maraniss, and I'm really excited to have Michael Husain as our guest today. Michael is, as you can see in his backdrop, a multi-award-winning filmmaker, joining us, I believe, from Indianapolis. Is that right, Michael?
That is,
and
yes.
You see the ABA basketball behind him. What we're going to talk about today is a terrific documentary that Michael has produced and directed on a sad legacy of the ABA. There's such nostalgia around that league, and just seeing that basketball. And sometimes there's more to this story. And so I want to learn about the more to the story when it comes to the ABA with your film, The Waiting Game. Michael, thanks for joining the show.
It's my pleasure to be here, and I love what you guys do there. So it's really an honor.
Oh, thank you, man. And as we record this, you mentioned that tomorrow, which is May 21st, there will be a public discussion of the film and the issues that it raises. So we'll be sure to share a link in the episode notes so people can access that. But Michael, first of all, for those who are unfamiliar with the film that you've made, can you give us the boilerplate on what is The Waiting Game? What's the subject that you dived into in this film?
Yeah, so a lot of people do have a nostalgic vibe about the ABA, which was, if you're uninitiated, a rival league to the NBA from 1967 to 1976, so 9 years, and those were transformational years. The ABA really kind of invented what we know as the modern game of basketball. So the origin story, so to speak, of the NBA is less the NBA itself and more that red, white, and blue ball right there. It's which was the iconic ball of the ABA, and by that I mean things that we kind of take for granted now. The pace of play, the athleticism that defines the NBA. The three-point shot, right, which is literally a game changer in terms of the strategy and the types of players that could play the game. Steph Curry, owes a lot to the ABA, for instance. Small guards who could bomb from deep. Those are ABA legacy guys, really, and also just the entertainment factor. So it was. They kind of really facilitated halftime shows and cheerleaders and player autonomy in terms of branding and fashion and things like that. And really the deep impact of Black culture on professional basketball. Lots of that was really facilitated and grown and driven by the ABA. So that's the debt that we owe the ABA. And when the two leagues combined, it's often been called a merger, but it really wasn't. It was an expansion of 4 teams. So 4 teams that are currently in the NBA were ABA legacy teams. The Pacers, the Spurs, the Nuggets, and the Nets. Those were ABA teams. And, the players that came into the NBA through that expansion, most of them did okay. Some of them had played their prime years in the ABA and they had a couple of years left and they played in the NBA. Others, like Julius Erving, 5 years in the ABA and then 11 in the NBA. And so, he did really, really well and was obviously a transformational player. But there were a number of guys who either didn't make the transition into the NBA or who played just a couple of years. What happened to them afterwards, these foundational players, pioneer players, you could say, in terms of defining the league, they were told, and this is a time of when the NBA Players Union and certainly the ABA Players Union did not have the stature, the clout, the power that they have now. So they were told by their representation, such that it was, that they had benefits of tenure from the years they had played in the ABA, an expectation of retirement benefits, healthcare benefits, and what happened in the decades after that when, as Bob Nedelecki put it, was a, I think, 8 or 9 year ABA guy, never really made it in the NBA. That he had called the NBA and said, "Hey, how do I get my pension started? The one that I was promised." And the NBA essentially said, "You don't have a pension here." And so some guys fell on really, really hard times, very, very sad stories of, kind of homelessness and inability to pay for critical medicine, just lots of things that when you're older, start to become really, really important. And they just didn't have a leg to stand on. And so the waiting game is the story of an organization that was founded here in Indianapolis, a not-for-profit called the Dropping Dimes Foundation, which was really just trying to step into the void and help, because the NBA had more or less said, we're not going to help these guys. We don't owe them anything. There's no legal basis for what you're talking about. And Dropping Dimes said, well, first of all, we're not sure about that. Maybe you do. And second of all, from a sort of moral, basic honor basis, then we think that these guys deserve much more respect than they're being given. And so they started off trying to help them financially. And then it turned out that one of the two founders of the Dropping Dimes Foundation was a mergers and acquisitions lawyer. And so he started looking into paperwork about this deep that defined what's been called the merger, was this expansion. And the film really dives into years of work by the Dropping Dimes Foundation to try and help them from a legal and then also a moral basis. And that's the heart of the story.
Yeah. So just for yourself as a filmmaker who has done projects that are unrelated to sports, in some cases, like what was it about this story that made you decide like this is something I want to, spend years pursuing and making?
Yeah, it did take a couple of years to make the film. It started off. You're right. I've made films about lots of different things. Certainly some sports stuff. I've done a lot of work with ESPN, but also biographies of other figures in the world, and I had just come off of a film about addiction, and so I was looking for something lighter. And so I met a guy named Scott Tarter, who is that M&A lawyer that I mentioned, who had co-founded Dropping Dimes, and he was talking to me. I just met him by chance, and he told me what he was doing, and I was surprised that this issue even existed. Like, because the league has become what it's become, that it has, television contracts that number into the tens of billions of dollars, that taking care of what is essentially a little over 100 guys that still remain from the ABA, a matter of is really a few $1,000,000 against tens of billions. That was surprised that it existed. And so, but he said they had been talking with the NBA for, at that point, well over a year, and then he thought it was very close to being solved. So I thought this was a short film. Like, can I follow you and the Dropping Dimes Foundation for this next 6 weeks while you get this done? And he said yes. And then, as fate would have it, 6 weeks came and went, nothing. Another month, nothing. And that kept repeating itself, sort of Groundhog Day-ish. And then, the consequence of that started to show up, meaning players that we had, former ABA players, started to get sick, started to pass away. These guys are in their 70s and 80s. That's happening a lot. And so we were able to watch this happening and unfolding. And I'm also watching the guy who becomes kind of our protagonist, Scott Tarter, go from a very kind of cool, calm, and collected lawyer to a guy who's getting pretty angry and frustrated and outraged at how could this be. And so that led us on and on until we come to the resolution of the film. So once that story started, and once I started to see the injustice of it, really is what it boiled down to, that I couldn't let go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what was the NBA's argument? That I mean, you make there must be a distinction here between what was maybe legally required versus sort of a moral obligation you hinted at, here.
Yeah.
But with it only being not that many people, not that much money in the grand scheme of things for the NBA, was there some sort of precedent that they were afraid of, or what was the crux of the issue from their standpoint?
To the best of my understanding, because I am not a lawyer, and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, this became what started off as a very beautiful kind of sports story, right? This deeply impactful league, kind of renegade, independent thinking league, um, to really a business and legal story. And so that, you get a lot of lawyers involved very quickly because the money got very big, for what the league's valuation was, the league being the NBA. And so I think when they looked at, okay, we have this legacy league, technically the ABA players were never employees of the NBA because it wasn't a merger. That's an important legal distinction, and the one that the NBA spent a lot of time crafting in 1976 and then letting play out afterwards. Even though, every major press outlet to this day still calls it a merger. And the NBA has allowed that to happen, that definition
Mm-hmm.
as a merger in the public parlance. But from a legal point of view, no, very much not a merger. And so I think they were afraid of a couple things. One, I think from a risk point of view, they're looking at it and saying, well, if we do this for these guys, who else is going to come knocking? How much are they asking for? You know, what happens then with widows and family members? It's um, it does get a little complicated if you let it. However, uh, there's also other paths that are easy. So basically, in the common way of looking at things, where there's a will, there's a way. And so, if you wanted to get this done, if you wanted to help these guys, without all your risk management, the massive risk management team that runs around the corporate offices, you could simply make it a charitable contribution. You could do lots of different things to make this happen. The Dropping Dimes Foundation is a not-for-profit. They could administer it for you. It's there, or any number of other organizations could. But that's not what happened, unfortunately, until there was an ABA player named George Carter, who in 2020, he had developed throat cancer. He was a longtime All-Star. He was a great player. Um, uh, had throat cancer. He was a limo driver at that point in his life, and he died penniless in Las Vegas. And his story caught on with a reporter here at the Indianapolis Star, and then later with the USA Today, and it created enough of a national awareness that, hey, these guys are struggling. How can this be? That the NBA at least came to the table, started talking with Dropping Dimes, and that's the discussion that Tarter had been having for a year plus when I met him. So it was
Mm.
really only through a little bit of shaming that started.
Wow. And how did Tartar and Dropping Dimes get formed? Was it a former ABA player that went to someone that could be helpful, or they just learned about this and out of the goodness of their heart got involved, or
No,
how did that
so
come to be?
yeah, it's great question. So we're in Indianapolis, right? So this is Pacers territory, and um, there was a very impressive former ABA player named Mel Daniels, who played for many years. He was a great player. He's a Hall of Famer now, and he, after his playing days, became a scout and then an assistant coach with the Pacers. And so he traveled around and he would see former ABA players struggling. There's a story of him going through airport at an airport traveling with the team, and he sees a sky cap at the Phoenix airport, and it's a former ABA player. And he's like, wait, that's, and you got to understand the ABA guys. they were very, very tight. It was almost a fraternal feeling of with them. And so when he sees a brother working like that, he was frustrated, and he would bang the drum as loud as he could. Finally, Tarter and his co-founder, Dr. John Abrams, who was, when he was a teen, was a ball boy for the Pacers, and then he went on to become an eye doctor, and he's been the Pacers eye doctor for nearly 40 years, I think. Um, they met Mel, and let them know what was happening. And Mel was a very forceful person. If you ever met him, and he was basically wouldn't let them go until they said they would do something. And so they formed Dropping Dimes as a not-for-profit, and very, very much at Mel's urging. So throughout the film, you'll see that there are these ABA players who stick their neck out for the guys that they consider their brothers.
Mm-hmm. And just curious, are you talking about a set of players that were only on those teams that then became part of the NBA? Like if you played for Kentucky Colonels or some other team that didn't become part of the NBA, they're not part of this discussion, or those players are as well?
No, what they had to ultimately, so when Dropping Dimes started looking at how do we approach the NBA about this, because the NBA wasn't paying any attention to the players themselves. So this was the first sense of representation that the players had had in 40 years. Um, they had to define it. Like, so who would be eligible for a pension? Because the players all would say there's documentation there. We saw it from our player representatives that said basically, the ABA players would be treated as if the two leagues were always one. And so they read that and said, that means the years that we played in the ABA count towards an NBA pension. Seems pretty straightforward to them. And so, okay, if that's the case, then who would qualify for a pension? Well, anybody who played 3 years, had 3 years of service time. That would start then a pension. So guys who played 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, no matter what your teams, because people bounced to lots of different teams.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody who qualified for that, and that was originally about 140 guys, and the numbers kept getting smaller as players would die. So what ultimately happened was a nuance to what you're talking about, which was that guys who did go into the NBA and play at least 3 years, therefore qualifying for an NBA pension, wound up being treated very differently than guys who might have played 3 years in the ABA and no NBA service time. So, and unfortunately, guys who are the Julius Erving is the easy example, right? No more influential player ever than Julius Erving. And when a little bit of help came for some ABA players, which we'll see unfold in the film, Julius got nothing. Julius got, and Julius doesn't need it financially, right? He's done very well for himself, but from a just basic respect point of view, there's not even a recognition of this time in the ABA, and so I think that stings for a lot of guys.
Yeah. Have there been, obviously the foundation raises money. I mean, this is clearly, the argument is this is the NBA's responsibility, but have individual teams or other former players, are there others that have stepped up in the void?
Unfortunately, no. I wish I could say otherwise. Quietly, excuse me, quietly,
Mm-hmm.
some have. So, for instance, there was a 50th year reunion here in Indianapolis a few years back, and the Simon family, which owns the Pacers, um, did help with that. They offered their arena for free to host this. They gave some money towards Dropping Dimes, but from an official capacity, really anything formal, to my knowledge, no one has really done that. There may have
Hmm.
been quiet donations to the Dropping Dimes foundations that I don't know about, but significant financial help from any individual or organization, to my
Yeah,
knowledge, has not happened.
and for that matter, current NBA Players Association or a current NBA star, someone with a platform,
Yeah,
would that make a big difference in your opinion?
it would make a huge difference. And to be fair, I mean, we did follow this story, and as it happened, the NBA obviously had been considering it and talking with Dropping Dimes for a while. Um, Towards the end, when CJ McCollum, who was the former head of the Players Association, he stepped down not even a year ago, um, heard about the issue, basically through social media. Uh, he did step into the void and try and help somewhat. He as the union head, and so when a little bit of help came from the players, which you'll see unfold in the film, the Players Association played an important role in that. The current Players Association.
Mhm.
Um, However, there's significant work that wasn't done. There's still guys that, as I mentioned, Julius and several other players, that really nothing happened, and some don't need the help, some do, and so um, it's a matter of not um, offering. If you don't offer the help universally, right? It's like, why are we doing this? Because I think guys like Julius or other guys, they would donate the money. They don't really need it. They want the respect. Um, Other guys who could use it to pay for some insulin, you know, who are we to judge how somebody uses the money that,
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
my opinion, they've earned?
Yeah. What are some of the stories that you learned? I know there's players that are profiled in the film. As a filmmaker, was it hard to convince people to share their life, that's the state of their life, when in some circumstances, they could potentially be embarrassed to share about their health or their finances? And what were some of the stories that you felt were you were able to tell most poignantly in the film?
Yeah, I think I was really impressed with everybody who did step up and talk. So even from your larger names, the Bob Costas, who began his career in the ABA, Julius Irving, Dan Issel, the Hall of Famers, they did speak in the film. And then, to your point, the guys who could use the help. Jimmy Jones is an example. He's a six-time ABA All-Star. He is driving an Uber to this day in Las Vegas, and just trying to make ends meet, which is what he says he does on a daily basis. And he didn't, mismanage his money or anything. There wasn't a ton of money. These guys were not making. It's important to note, anything close to what today's players make. So contracts in the late '60s were probably around 20,000 a year. So I mean, you're just, scale is so different.
Hmm.
So when Jimmy retired, he taught school. He worked for Amway. He's done lots of different things to try and make ends meet. And he's just a guy I wound up having an incredible amount of respect for. As a player, I saw him be kind of like nearly a Hall of Fame level player. Um, and yet here he is in the latter years of his life. Finances are not easy. Ralph Simpson, who lives in Denver, same thing. Not that he's driving an Uber, but he put aside heart surgery for a number of years, life-saving heart surgery, because he was afraid of the bills. And those sorts of things um, are not easy for someone to talk about. Anyone, let alone an elite athlete, where um, you drive your own um, future. You're self-determined, based on your athletic skills and your work ethic. And so these guys were the elite athletes of their day, and for them to humble themselves and say, "Hey, I need some help," that to me was very, very impressive. And then the the other maybe softer side of things, but because of this decision to not help them has caused a lot of pain. And you know, the guy who was the head of the ABA Players Union, a very weak union at the end of the league's time, had to make a decision. Do we sign this piece of paper that's been put in front of us to bring 4 teams into the NBA? And, you know, he looked at it and said, you know, he's no lawyer. He didn't have a lawyer counseling him, and said, if I don't sign this, every player in the ABA will be unemployed. And I represent these guys. If I sign it, at least 4 teams worth of players will go in. And so he signed it. And as it became clear that what he thought was in there, because he was told, you know, there are pensions for players, there are, you know, other benefits in there, as he realized that it really wasn't, that the legalese was so slick that that it just didn't exist. He has felt guilt for 40 plus years. And he talked to us about that. First time he had ever talked about it publicly. A guy named Jumbo Jim. His name was Jim Akins, but he went by Jumbo Jim because he was nearly 7 feet tall. And he's a very sweet man. And, you know, one of the nice things about the film is that as players have seen the film and seen Jim's pain, we've had a number of times where we've called him after a screening, and these players who he hasn't heard from for many, many years are telling him, Jim, you're good with us. You don't have anything to be guilty about. And that's been a lovely thing to see.
Yeah, I can imagine. When you think about the lessons of this story that transcend basketball or transcend specifically the ABA, like what do you think this whole situation says about society or business or the way we deal with people in the later stages of their life in this country?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple of different things there. One is that yes, these players, once they stop playing, right, a bookkeeper would look at them and see them as depreciating assets or liabilities. And so it's unfortunate that human beings become grouped like that, like a decaying machine, something that might cost more to maintain going on. And but I think the most important thing to me is that it's a story of capitalism. The NBA ultimately is a business. It's an sports entertainment business, and things like what happened to these players happen when somehow in the corporate boardroom, humanity doesn't get a seat at the table. So, like, you know, we can look at what's a valuation and the dollars that something might be worth, you know, times 10 or whatever your multiplier is when you're looking at a merger and acquisition. But if there isn't somebody at the table that says, wait, just for a second, let's look at are there human costs here that we're not evaluating? These kinds of things can happen. I'm a capitalist. I think it's a great system, but it is imperfect. It has blind spots. And so this is a story that reveals some of those blind spots and the very real pain that comes with it. And it just happens to be a business that deals in sports.
I think Amazon Prime has an ABA documentary series on right now. Like, do you have mixed feelings about that? I mean, on one hand, you've been working on this. This is an important story. Then you got Prime like promoting this other film. Do they work together? Does this ultimately help elevate the story you're trying to tell? Or like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I guess I don't have a problem with it. And those guys have been great about trying to help promote the waiting game as well. I think it's, you know, I wanted our film to do a couple things. First and foremost, I wanted it to celebrate the ABA and all that it brought to basketball and these players. And then tell the story of what happened to them afterwards. The story you may think you know, but you don't know. Soul Power, which is the ABA piece on Amazon, really is kind of 1967 to 1976. It really doesn't go past that, and so if that helps celebrate the ABA, then we have, intersecting missions. That's great. I don't have a problem with it. I think there's room for lots of great stories out there. And if it gets the ABA guys some attention in that they deserve in the latter parts of their lives, I'm thrilled for that. I wish we had the marketing oomph that Amazon is able to give a project, but that's just the way it is. This is an independent film. And you mentioned that we have an event coming up tomorrow night. And that's, Julius Irving, Bob Costas, Artis Gilmore,
Wow.
Scott Charter, and myself will be having a live question and answer period on our YouTube page on what is called The Realist, REELIST. It is an independent streaming service for independent films. So there are lots of stories like this, and that don't get the Amazon Prime treatment, so to speak. There are only 5 or 6 major streamers in the world,
Right.
and so lots of films, great independent documentaries, are not finding a home these days. And so the Realist is set up to actually do that. And so the waiting game is, you can see it on the Realist. It's the only place that you can actually stream it, and it's REELIST.stream is the way to find that. And so this is a live Q&A that will talk about the experiences of those players. Scott Tarter will talk about his experience with dropping dimes. Bob Costas is going to host, which is fun.
Yeah.
And it'll be just a pleasure for me to sort of sit and listen to those guys and occasionally throw in a thought.
Well, what a great collection you've got there. That's awesome. And I mean, really, the Prime series is incomplete without the work. I mean, the story is incomplete without, bringing it up to date. And the what's happened with these guys and these players. It's amazing that you've, dedicated this chunk of your life to telling this story that could have a real impact on lives. Has anything changed since the time that the film came out, or is that what you're going to be talking about some tomorrow?
We will talk about that tomorrow. One of the nice things is we've done a ton of community screenings and different things like that, and it's generated a bunch of donations to, including the largest single donation that Dropping Dimes has ever received. So Dropping Dimes has gotten some money out of it, and that's good. But in terms of like a structural thing, something that either the Players Association or a retired player or something that to step up and say, because there has been some help that's been done without giving away the film, basically for another $5 million roughly, and a press release, right? A press release that says, just the ABA was definitive in all the great things that are happening in the NBA, and we appreciate that. I think that's what a lot of the former players are really looking for, much more than a check. And so the guys who really need the help, that's the $5 million. So $5 million and a press release, and we could solve a decent amount of human suffering for guys that really need it. That's that's a tax deductible contribution for some people.
Hmm. Hmm.
And if the right people can see it, the right former player, the right current player, the current players association, I would love to see this solved. That would make me, it'd be one of the best things that's ever happened in my professional career.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, um, obviously, I hope that happens, and maybe
Me too.
someone listening or watching to this podcast is the right person. You never know.
Yeah.
So, Michael, thank you for taking the time to come on the show. Congratulations on creating another great film.
Thank you.
Again, we're talking about an event tomorrow, which as we're recording this on May 20th. So this is May 21st, where people could tune
Yeah.
in and
8 p.m.
learn.
Eastern, and if they miss it, it'll be on the Realist YouTube page for anybody to watch. But if they want to throw
Oh,
a question live, that's tomorrow at 8.
got it. Okay. Michael, again, thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you again soon, hopefully, when there's a terrific resolution to this story.